Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Unleash Your Voice. I am so thrilled to have Emily Feairs with us today. Emily is a former chief of staff turned executive advisor and leadership strategist. She works with senior women leaders across corporate, government, and policy spaces. She is the co-founder of the Power Shift, a national event series convening women shaping Canada's most consequential decisions, and Our Time to Lead, an initiative advancing women's political leadership. Through her coaching practice, Emily helps high-performing women move from over-functioning operators to strategic power players at the top of their fields. Emily, it is so wonderful to have you here on Unleash Your Voice.
Thank you so much for having me, Priya. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Me too. Okay, I want to start by asking you, tell me about a time in your career when you unleashed your voice.
I love that question. I always love starting with like a personal story. And I think for a long time, I really felt like unleashing my voice meant I was going to speak up in a meeting. Politics is a male dominated industry. And so speaking up, I felt like was how I was going to unleash my voice. But that actually wasn't when I truly unleashed my voice. It came later. It was realizing that my voice was actually there to shape the conversation. So as a chief of staff, I had spent years really building a career supporting other people's voice and visions and, really amplifying them, helping them refine it. It was all their voice and vision. And so I think the biggest time, the shift that happened when I really unleashed my voice was actually deciding that I had something important to say and that my ideas were worth building instead of just always contributing or amplifying other people's ideas. And so I've started doing that as a chief of staff, really started being the author of ideas. I've amplified that and continued that as I've gone through all of these other iterations of the businesses that I'm building. And truly the Power Shift has been the biggest national expression of that, which is really exciting as well.
I love that. And I feel like what you just described, it's like this progression of unleashing your voice more and more, right? And it's really inspiring. And I also feel like it's real because sometimes we get caught up in these like, oh, this is like the specific moment that everything changed. And those moments are important and they're great. But what happens for most of us is that it is more gradual.
Yeah.
And you kind of take those smaller steps and then you just continue. But then when you look at the shift from, I'm sure, where you are today to where you were in those early days of your career, it's massive.
Exactly. I think the first one, when I started out, the first was just nodding along. Felt like using my voice, being like, yes, 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 okay, sure. And then starting to influence and persuade other people was sort of like when I started to feel like, oh no, this is really owning my voice. And then when I really actually started saying, no, here's what I think, or I have an idea I'm bringing to the table, that sort of felt like the third layer, but it really was baby steps all the way from one to the next to the next.
Yeah, I think that is just, it's so relatable. And you have had an incredible career path. So from chief of staff at the
Mhm.
highest levels of government to executive coach, advisor, co-founder of the initiatives I mentioned in the intro. So what was the moment that you realized your future was really in helping other women step into their power?
Yeah, well, I started noticing a pattern. It was certainly inside of government. The way that a lot of the offices are set up is you have sort of the boardroom and the minister's office and the chief of staff, and then it like all goes down one long hallway. And so we'd funnel out of the boardroom and the minister would go back into their office. And then I would go into my office. And it was like this lineup of women would come into my office and say, oh, I was thinking about that meeting we just had. And what if we did this, this, and this? It was like, well, why didn't you just say that in the meeting we were just in? And it was like, I was a safe space that they felt that they could bring their voice to. And I noticed that these same women would not get promoted. They had excellent ideas. They were incredibly capable. They were really smart, but no one had actually taught them about power, how it moves, how to use power. And I don't mean power in like the sort of dirty way that a lot of people say it, or mean in, power over other people or like dominance. Power just meaning like how to create outcomes. And so they would have all these ideas but they wouldn't actually create the outcome. They would hand it off to someone else to create the outcome. They would like drop ship their ideas to someone else and then have someone else execute on them. And that meant that they always had a ceiling on their growth because people thought they just didn't have ideas because they were never voicing them. And so when I really started to see that pattern, and I also was inside of so much decision making, so I saw how decisions got made, I realized that we were actually missing a really critical voice that made decisions better. And so that's when I really started to understand that we need women to understand how power moves, to understand how to use influence and how to speak up, not just like speak up, but to really understand how to be strategic and influential in order to actually advance their ideas to create the outcome that we're all working towards. And that was when I really started to see like, if we don't do this, we are losing such critical voices around decision making tables. And I just knew I couldn't not do it anymore.
The way you explained that is really powerful. I think like I hear this a lot from the women I work with too that, oh, somebody else took credit for my idea. Or like, I wish I had said that in that room because then somebody else said it 15 minutes later. And sometimes when we backtrack on the story and like what exactly happened, it's more along the lines of what you said. And I'm not saying it never happens that someone took credit for their idea, but it's what you said where they share it with one person and then that person runs with it. And now all of a sudden that person's bleeding it, right? And that person's getting the credit for it. And that person's getting the promotion because of it. And I appreciate that you use the word power and that you explain what you're referring to, because I do think as women, like power, just like words like arrogance or bragging, they kind of get like a dirty reputation. Like we don't want to be seen as like being power hungry, for
Yeah.
example. But the way you describe it, it's like this is a fact, right? Of the systems that exist, and we have to learn how to leverage it.
Exactly. And every organization has power, every relationship, every situation actually has power. And I actually like kind of crinkle my nose at the word empower women as if they don't already have power. We actually do. I had at one of the Power Shift events, we had Tiziana Cacharo, and she is a professor at U of T Rotman School of Business, and she studies power. And so she explained power as having something of value that other people want or need. I really love the simplicity of that definition because when you can think of it that way, then your ideas become power. Your way of seeing the world becomes power. Your experiences become power. And we can start to understand that we actually have a ton of power levers that we maybe weren't giving ourselves credit for. We don't need to be empowered by someone else. It's not an outside thing that we need to get from someone else. It's actually already within us. And just knowing what they are and how to use them is actually what can really create some of the biggest changes for women.
Oh, yes, that hits home. It actually ties into this next question because on your website, you share something really vulnerable that, even when you had an enviable title, powerful people calling you for advice, you had these feelings of imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud, and like it still wasn't enough.
Mhm.
And I know I hear that from a lot of the women I work with too, that despite, having these big titles, great salaries, they still have some of that self-doubt. So what was actually going on underneath the surface for you during that time? And what do you think finally cracked it open?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we think about how women are socialized too, right? It is, first of all, about power. So when you have power, there's this dissonance between women are socialized to be nice and don't be bossy, right? Boys are never called bossy, only girls are. Don't make people uncomfortable, make everyone happy, especially as a leader. You want to make everyone who works for you feel really good. And so there's this dissonance that was kind of between holding power, but having all of these subtle messages throughout my entire life that told me that women shouldn't hold power because it's sort of antithetical to who we're supposed to be in the world. And then I think that collided with this feeling of fear that would come up in me. I was making really big
Mhm.
decisions, like billion with a B dollar decisions that if I got them wrong would affect a lot of people. And so fear would come up. And I think I used to take fear as evidence that I'm doing it wrong. or that I'm not good enough or not ready to do it, instead of just seeing like, oh, this is just the normal human reaction to doing something big. And it's not actually information about me being wrong. It's just information I'm doing something big. And the more I can start to see that fear as just a signal that we're about to do something big and that it's not going to be wrong, and that those feelings, and I sort of tangled those feelings and thoughts that I had about power and realized that they were just levers that I needed to pull in order to create the outcome that I needed to do in the best interest of all the Ontarians that I was working for. Was putting those together, I finally sort of started to reconcile the identity of, I'm not just here to prove myself and like constantly try and overcome that fear and like white knuckle through it, but that I actually had really great power levers. I had good ideas, like I said before, when I started unleashing my voice and becoming the author. And then I really had to tell myself a better story about all of it. So women often come to me, and again, they have like great titles and they've done all these amazing things in the world, but they tell themselves a really crappy story about themselves. It's like, oh, well, I got that award, but that's only because they really liked this thing that I did. It's like, well, no, you got the award because that thing that you did was really cool or amazing or awesome in the world. And they're like, oh no, it's no big deal. And so I really also had to start telling myself a different story, that I wasn't just a chief of staff because, no one was left. It's like that wasn't actually true. I was chief of staff because I could prove myself, because I could walk into a room and read exactly what was going on, because I could pull those levers and influence people. And when I could tell myself a better story about all of those things, about the feeling of fear when it came up, about what power actually meant, and about the things that I was doing in the world, that's when I started to overcome a lot of that feeling and that I was a fraud. But it really took, again, baby steps. It wasn't just like a aha moment and I woke up one night. It really was a process of growth that happened throughout that time.
And I know that this exact work that you did on yourself, like that's exactly what you help your clients to do too. You work with, vice presidents, CEOs, elected officials, lots of other C-suite executives. So when as you're taking people through that work that you just described, what surprises them the most when they realize that, like, even at their level, that inner work is
Mhm.
still unfinished? And I'm curious to know if you have any examples you can share with us.
Yeah. I mean, so I think what surprises them the most is leadership can be really exposing. And they will think, I got this role, I got the confidence, it's all good. But you actually just expose yourself to greater criticism, to having to make those decisions. When you're in a middle management role, you can always like send it up the chain to make a decision. When you're at the top, there's nowhere else for it to go. And so I think they either underestimate or don't understand how exposing or risky it feels. Again, not that it is, but how risky it can feel to be at the top and in the public eye in those ways. And CEOs very much are in the public eye these days in a way that they never were 50, 60 years ago. And so now they need to make decisions with incomplete information. They need to make decisions that are going to make some people unhappy or that they get criticized for. And so a lot of this inner work comes down to the story you tell yourself when you have to make those decisions. Because the real work isn't about knowing all the answers or being certain. It is ensuring that you can reflect after a bad decision or a good decision and adjust as needed and tell yourself a story that keeps you going instead of beating yourself up so that you feel like you have less and less to give every day. And so I think the biggest surprise really is around just how exposing all of that feels. It's like you're suddenly naked on the stage and you didn't expect that because you have this great, amazing news that you've just been elected, or you're the CEO, or you're this amazing role that you've worked so hard for, and you feel like, finally I've made it. And then all of a sudden you feel naked in front of the world sometimes.
Yes, that's a great description. I really appreciate that you talk about the story you tell yourself, because I work with people a lot on the stories they tell others.
Mm,
But what they don't know when they start working with me is that a lot of the work we do is changing the story they tell themselves too.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, it made me think actually of this woman that I worked with who somebody early in her career had told her she could never be a leader because she was too introverted.
Hmm.
And so that story really stuck with her. And she always had like this desire to be in a leadership role, but she kept holding back because of that person, right?
Mm.
That that had said that to her early on. And so when we started working together, like eventually this came out. And that was actually like once we changed that and fixed that internal story, it's like everything else just poured out of her. It was really like breaking through that dam that was
Yeah.
blocking like all of these great leadership qualities and stories and everything that she had. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think the story you tell yourself is just so important. And I really like I think even at those senior levels, right? Like with the people you work with, it's still one of the most important things to work on.
And one of the stories that I think women tell themselves the most is that they have to be someone other than who they are. And
Yes.
we think, okay, what does this CEO want me to be? Or what do my voters want me to be? Or what does this VP want me to be? And we try and be the best version of that. And what I've found and what it really makes me excited is when I can work with women and we actually get just like back to being them. I was told something similar. I'm a little rough around the edges. I like to swear. I like my hip hop. I like to have a lot of fun too. Like I'm not the kind of leader who wants to keep everything super serious. And I remember a woman telling me at one point, like, she said something to the effect of like, oh my God, I can't believe you're going to be a mother. Or like, I can't believe you'll ever be a leader. Like you're so uncouth or something to that effect. And I took that in. I definitely did. And then I thought, oh, well, I need to be really buttoned up, super serious. And the exact pattern played out in which I was so buttoned up and super serious that I was actually up for a chief of staff role in a particular office. And I didn't get it because I didn't even see the work that I was doing. I was so buttoned up, so not myself, so quiet about things. I'd almost swung to the opposite and thought I was like being the exact version of a chief of staff that they wanted me to be, that they gave it to someone else who's much more vocal, knew how to tell their story, knew how to show the work that they were doing. And they ended up not being the right leader. And they had problems, but it was because I, at that time, really didn't know how to speak my own story, really didn't know how to be myself, that I ended up actually cutting myself short for that role, just because I was trying to not be myself. And that mental energy it takes up too, to try and be someone else or something else is huge.
It really is. And then you end up hiding your best qualities too, because I mean, now for you, like that bold energy, I mean, that's what people know you for. So it's so interesting that, like, as you step further into that, it's actually become your biggest differentiator instead of like the thing that that person said would hold you back.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The more you lean into it. And I'd have many clients too who come to me and they're like, I really want to lead in this feminist way and try to like ease people into it. And I always say, no, go in being you. And if you need to pull it back and adjust in order to, you know, meld your style with the team, because they were the head of this organization, then like that's something we can talk about. But don't try and come in as something else and then slowly leak yourself. Like be all you. And she said she came in and they've been led by someone else who's very the opposite of the style, and they loved how she showed up. I thought it was so refreshing and so different and so energizing. And so it actually changed the organization for the better for her to be all of herself. And so I think that's like really important for us to remember, Now, same with elected officials. I think have this idea that elected officials really need to be buttoned up and have to like follow a certain set of rules. And I always think of, I think her name was Senamara, and I want to say she was the prime minister of like Finland or Sweden or one of the Nordic countries. And she was like dancing with her friends on a weekend and someone recorded it on the video and then it got leaked and everyone was like, oh, like clutching their pearls. Meanwhile, Trump can dance on a stage to the YMCA any old time and no one's worried about it. And so it's this idea that like we actually need to break the mold. It's like the only reason I remember her name is because she danced and because that meant something to a huge generation of women who were like, I get to see myself in you. So I think that's really so important, is bringing that piece of who you are to the things that you do.
Yes. I completely agree. And being able to see those things as what sets you apart. And I really love that example that you gave about your client, because I also think when you lean further into who you are, the right people and opportunities can find you. Like that's how they find you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you do end up in those misaligned roles, right? When you're trying to be who you think other people want you to be.
Yes. Yeah. And you show up as vanilla, right? I'm sure you encounter this in your storytelling every day. Is like people are like, wow, I'm just going to
Yeah.
tell the most vanilla, acceptable version of myself. Actually, spicy is what we remember. Spicy is what stands
Yes.
out. And so if you can juice it up with a little bit of you, then it starts to feel so much more memorable, so much more interesting, so much more textural and like human again.
Absolutely. I know in the intro I mentioned the Power Shift
Mhm.
and Our Time to Lead, which are both initiatives that you have been part of creating. So I'm curious to know, like, what gap were you seeing that made you feel like these initiatives needed to exist? And I know you mentioned like that understanding of power, which I believe is a big part of both of them. But I guess I'm also wondering, what does that say about where we are right now and how much work still needs to be done?
Yeah, there's a ton of work that still needs to be done, and not just for women, but for everyone. Like our workplaces are still running the model in which they assume that there is a nuclear family with one person at home, and that person is happy and willing to be able to take care of all of the caregiving, both to your parents, to other family, to children, if you have them, to whomever in your life is in need of that, and that they're willing to do all the domestic labor, and that life is as simple as it was. There isn't 87 apps that you need to manage your kids or camp or drop off and pick up to schedule or a meal train for your neighbor who has cancer or all the other things that really clog up our days. I mean, if you needed to use the bank back then, you just like went to the bank. And now I feel like I have to log into an app, use a face verification, add in a code, take a picture of the check front and back just to deposit it. Like, yeah, I think there's just
Yeah.
increasing complexity in our lives. And we're running in a workplace model that assumes none of that is true. And it's only getting more and more complex. And so what I really saw is a structural gap. So our time to lead focuses on progressive women candidates who want to run and make Canada better for all of the women here and really advance a lot of women's issues. The Power Shift is doing a very similar thing for women within organizations. And right now we are focused on the ones that have the most funding and attention on them. So that's infrastructure, energy, defense and security, financial and capital systems. Those are really like we in Canada are at a hinge moment in which we are truly seeing unprecedented generational amounts of investment and attention on these industries. And yet every single one has such a problem attracting and retaining women because they're built on systems that are from decades and decades and decades ago, like last century. And that just doesn't work for today. And it doesn't respect and acknowledge kind of like what the actual reality of 2026 and beyond is. And so that I think is the true problem. It's not that women can't lead. It's not that women aren't ready to lead. It's not that they're not confident enough to lead. The problem is that we try and shove them into these institutions that were never built with them in mind and ask them to turn themselves inside out to try and make it work and then blame them when they inevitably fail because they're set up to fail. Or when they finally do break through, then it's like, oh, well, but she wasn't a good mom, or, she sucked her way to the top is another fun one, all the things that women, or there's just something about her I don't like is one that I often hear. And so I think what really needs to change is actually much more of a cultural shift. And it's a bit of a chicken
Mm.
the egg, which is why we've created these two organizations, is because which comes first? The cultural shift and then we accept people, or we get enough people in there to create the tipping point in which the cultural shift starts happening. And so we're sort of trying to work on it from both the systems level as well as the personal level. And in the middle is that interpersonal level, right? Where systems of people meet. And so we're trying to tackle the problem from all sides because truly there is a lot of work to do. We've seen the backlash in women and DEI. And so I think we really need to tell a new story. And that's what we're aiming to do, is to tell a new story of like, you shouldn't just do it because it's the right thing to do. I mean, we believe it is, but we really need to speak to people in a way that they can understand. So the communication strategy really needs to talk about this hinge moment and this investment, and that we actually don't have the talent to fulfill these ambitions if we're just looking for more of the same. We really need to reach into the incredible talent pool that is the women we have in this country.
You mentioned at the beginning, like, it's about women, but it's not just about women. It's
Mm-hmm.
about everyone. And is allyship a big part of the initiatives, and how, like, what's the response been from allies?
Yeah. So for our time to lead, there is a huge component which you can sign up to. Essentially, you're like, I really want to support someone who's progressive, but maybe I don't have anyone in my rural area who really fits the market. You can do phone banking, which is sort of like knocking on doors, but over the phone. You can support them with funds. You can support them with just any skills that you had. We actually created a whole community practice for these 15 first-time women candidates to get the support that they needed. We had people who are like comm specialists coming in and helping them write their literature pieces, right? Like we actually had this really amazing way in which people could show up as allies. But I'd say 99% of that were men, or sorry, were women. There was maybe like one guy who showed up for a very small amount of time. And then the power shift is getting much more men. And people asked us in the beginning, why aren't you just assembling rooms of men and talking to them? They are who we need to convince in order to change. And we really sat with that question and thought, well, what we don't want is for men to come in to these events, hear some new perspectives, and then pat themselves in the back and walk away and feel like, I did my job. What we wanted was actually for women to feel like they could speak the truth in these rooms, truth that they wouldn't get hurt for, right? So not having their boss sitting there, like any kind of ramifications for them. And then myself and my co-founder, Frederique, as chief of staff, we were both former chiefs of staff. And so we knew how to take that data, that information, translate it into policy, and then go to decision-making tables. And so we thought, we're the neutral third party. We can show up and advocate for those. And so in the conversations we're having, we really are finding, I mean, it's shocking in 2026 for us, but it's unfortunately a reality. It's like a lot of men are so like, oh, I never thought about the fact that defense and security has such a low amount of women. I never thought about the fact that we're building all this housing and women are a tiny fraction of the decision makers. And so when they hear it, they're quite receptive, especially as we've been conscious about how we communicate it. And we are getting some more mentor events, and we tell them, you're welcome to come, you're welcome to listen. If you have a question, the women will be prioritized in having their questions answered because the space is mainly for them. And they've been happy. We've had male senators come, we've had male MPs and MPPs come. We've had a lot of men within the government and other decision-making roles within industry come. And so they are coming, they are interested, there are allies. Is it a huge wave? No. And do we still need to be conscious about how we word things? Yes. So we're not there yet. We're not.
The fact that there is, like, that you're getting people who are curious and willing to get uncomfortable
Mhm.
and sit in those rooms, it's like a great start. But I hear you, like, we need more of that, and we need more of, even, you mentioned the word, you were talking about your client earlier, and you talked about like her feminist approach.
Mhm.
Even that word, I feel like one of the women in my group program actually said the other day, like, men can be feminists too. And I was like, like,
Mhm.
feminist leadership doesn't mean it's a woman leading.
It doesn't.
It's
Yeah.
like it's an approach. And I thought like, wow, yes. I mean, even for me, I'd never thought about it that way, but it's so true. And I think like even just the language we use, we just need to get more comfortable with using those words to apply to a way of doing things as opposed to like describing the person doing them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, feminism is really just about equality and centering other people, right? A matriarchal society is not like the Barbie movie in which women rule everything. It is like we center other people. And I think that that's something that many men would be willing to take on and be willing to champion if they didn't have that bristly feeling at just like the top line word of
100%. You have a program called Influential and In Demand, and it's built around helping women translate their experience into a compelling story
it.
that gets them in the right doors. I'm curious to know, what would you say is like the biggest challenge women face in this area? And then what happens to them when they get it right? Like when they go through this program with you and then they finally get it right?
Yeah. So I think the first thing they do is that they describe what they've done. And when they describe it, they downplay it. They sort of make it like a checklist. I managed this team. I did their report. I created the decks. It's like it will put you to sleep. It's a great way if you're having sleepless nights to kind of like lull yourself into a state, right? And so what I really flip for them is understanding the problem that that role is meant to solve. Because that's what's valued, right? If we go back to like power, it's you have something that someone else wants you. And so if you can go in and say you are looking for, let's say SVP of marketing, what is the problem that that role solves? And maybe it's for a consumer product brand like Kraft Dinner. It's like, well, people aren't eating as much Kraft Dinner anymore because, they think they have to make it on the stovetop or something. It's like, okay, so the problem is that not enough people are eating Kraft Dinner. So my job is to solve that problem because it means that that's a loss in terms of their sales. You turn your experience into the solve for that problem. Here's the problem that existed before I arrived. Here's the decisions that I made. Here's what became possible afterwards, or here's the results. And so you start talking in terms of outcomes and processes as opposed to that checklist. And I think that
Yes.
when you can do that, people start to click so much faster and understand and can mentally put you into their problem set or their company if it's an interview, or start to understand how to best utilize your skills. And it's so much easier. They don't have to make any mental leaps. It's right there for them. So it's like on a silver platter. And it means that suddenly a coffee date is turning into opportunities. Suddenly you're
Yes.
getting roles offered to you. People come to you because they know what kind of problems you solve. You're not going out and looking for your next role. And that's what I think is really possible when people start to know and understand how to communicate their value through outcomes and through problem solving.
Definitely. Oh, I'm just nodding along here because I feel the exact same way. It's such a game changer. And so often the experience is already there.
Mm.
It's really about exactly what you said, that, defining that, having that clearly defined narrative and being able to speak in outcomes and impact. That makes the difference rather than doing the resume recaps
Yeah,
or the task lists that really just can make you sound like a doer and, like not someone who's strategic, even if you are.
exactly. And at executive levels, that's what they really need to understand is not that you can do stuff. That's the first half of your career. The executive levels, they need two things. They know they can trust you. Trust is achieved through either referrals or through a predictive understanding of what you can do. And storytelling is the best way to have someone understand here's what she can do and here's how she's done it. And it also requires, as you said, strategy, judgment. the ability to discern right from wrong in terms of like paths forward. And that's what you really need to be able to communicate for those higher level roles. It's not just I did X number of things in this amount of time and that created, 4,500 hits or something. It is truly, I knew what the right marketing strategy was in order for this to go viral. And I knew that because I understood the problem and I understood the moment. That's more compelling than however many, views of that. And I think that's what we need to really hone in on telling.
Yes, 100%. And you are also a great example of that in action. Like, I always appreciate and love your LinkedIn
Mm.
content. It's like your story's very clear, your ideas, your perspective, it's bold and compelling. So I really love to see like you being an example of the work that you do and what you help other women to do too.
Well, thank you. That's a high
And on
compliment
that
coming from you, Priya. I don't take that lightly.
Oh my gosh, no, I mean it. Like it's really, really great. Excellent storytelling. And speaking of that, okay, we as women, you know this from the women you work with. I know this. We always move past our wins, right? We're like,
Oh,
okay, what's next? What am I working on next? I don't even take the time to celebrate. So I want to put you on the spot a little bit here
oh,
and ask you, we just walked through your career, like the rooms you started in, the work you did to be where you are now, and now how you're using all of that experience to not just help women individually, but really to transform systems so
mm,
that they are more conducive to helping more women succeed. So I'm curious, when you think about what you're most proud of as you reflect on your own journey,
mhm.
what would you say that is?
Well, this year it's really been the Power Shift. Like the Power Shift was just created this year, which is hard to believe 6 months in that we've had, the thousands of people already that we had. Our very first event we pulled together in less than 6 weeks, got sponsors, got a venue. We did a screening of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's documentary. And we thought, it'd be cool if we got like 100 people at each event. So we had one in Toronto and one in Ottawa. And over 550 women, and we had to close down ticket sales because we were like over fire capacity at some points. We were like, oh, we really need to make sure that we close the doors here. And so I think it was that we approached this, myself and Frederique, who's my co-founder, we really approached this never thinking that we couldn't do it. And that I think is just again baby stepping, this is like the where I'm at in my career right now is this idea that now I've proven to myself enough times that I can do it, that I got to the spot where I just never thought that I couldn't do it. And then that energy, I think, is carried through in so much of what we do. And women are really hungry to hear about power and systems and how we can freaking change this because we're frustrated, we're angry, and I think we're at the moment where we're not willing to tolerate it anymore. And that makes me really excited.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I know that after hearing all of this, everything you're working on, I know the people listening are going to want to connect with you. So, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, you mentioned LinkedIn, so you can find me at LinkedIn. It's just my name, Emily Feairs, and last name spelled Feairs. And the Power Shift can be found at the powershiftseries.ca. But LinkedIn really is the best place where I write about everything and I tag everything and you can find it all there. And DM me, like tell me that you heard about me from this episode. I usually always have like some freebies in my back pocket to give people anyway. So if you reach out to me, I might have something special to give to you.
I love that. That's great. Thank you. And we will link to Emily's LinkedIn profile and the PowerShift website in the show notes as well. Emily, thank you so much for being
Thank you,
here. I
Priya.
honestly, I feel like I could talk to you all
I
day.
know we
This is
could.
great.
Wonderful. I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. Make sure you follow or subscribe to Unleash Your Voice on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss our weekly episodes. They drop every Tuesday. And as Emily mentioned, send us a message. Let us know what you thought of the episode, what resonated with you. Until next time, remember your story is the one thing you have that no one else has. I'll see you next week.